Hey guys, before we begin, just need to let you know we got a little carried away with this one. When Joel and I get together, we start talking, we ramble, as you are well aware. So we're going to break it up a little bit.
We took on a pretty massive topic today, and that's mishandled franchises.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of went back and forth about how we're going to cover them, and we decided to just talk about all of them. And that topic spans, once we get into just the main topic or our main course, the Matrix trilogy, 7 Terminator properties, 14 X-Men properties, an Unbreakable trilogy, 7 Aliens films and properties, I guess, 4 Predator movies, and 2 Alien versus Predator movies. Then try as we might, we could not condense that into a consumable dish for you. It is a literal dim sum smorgasbord. And we
ate it all.
We ate a lot.
Ate it all.
So we're going to break this one into 3 parts and give this a try on this one. We probably won't stick to this, but we'd had just so much to cover this time. That's what we chose to do on this one.
And part 1.
Yeah, part 1 will cover our intro, our appetizers like we always do, and then we're going to discuss the just the Matrix. And then from there, we'll have a break and we'll come back for a part 2, where we will get into the Terminator franchises, the X-Men properties, and the Unbreakable trilogy. Then for part 3, we're going to hit, because these 3 do kind of all tie together, Aliens, the Predator movies, and then the Alien versus Predator movies. And then we'll get to our desserts as well and just try to wrap the whole thing up from there.
And you'll notice that we really tried our desserts. We have a couple of desserts, a couple of appetizers. We really tried to get a little thinner where we could with the content. But like I said, get me and Joel in a room talking and we'll go all day.
It took us a while to just cut down all of the properties out there to the ones we talked about today.
Right.
And even at that, we came up with over 4.5 hours of content. So please check out all 3 of them.
We'll cut it down to make it a little more manageable.
We'll have it broken down into pieces for you. It'll be a part 1, part 2, part 3. We appreciate you watching all of them. And hopefully you'll enjoy the content that we've got for you.
We'll see you at the end of it.
See ya.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Appalachian Dim Sum podcast.
Appalachian Dim Sum, where our entertainment is our steamed pork buns.
There you go.
It's our comfort food.
How you doing, Joel?
Good, Randy. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
I'm glad to be back. I'm really liking the cadence of this, the once a month thing.
Yes.
It's good seeing you at least once a month.
Yes.
Before we started doing this, man, it would be sometimes 6 months between actually getting together.
Just texting back and forth every once in a while.
That's right.
Half the time responding to a text 3 days after. It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You texted me this in the middle of the night. Yeah. Well, for episode 3, we're gonna start off with the appetizers.
Yes.
What are you gonna have?
My appetizers are gonna be. We'll get into details on it. This is gonna be sumo and the Haunted Cosmos podcast. There's some random stuff for you.
Yeah. My appetizers are extraordinary. Ever heard of this show?
I have not.
We'll get into it.
I hope it's extraordinary.
And a movie called Ash, which is we'll talk about why that's interesting, because I didn't know you were doing the Haunted Cosmos podcast.
Well,
and then our main course.
Yeah, our main course is going to be, of course, chosen last time from our little bowl of fortune cookies. That it's a pretty massive undertaking on this one. It was, how did we word it? Mishandled properties.
Mishandled properties. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it ended up being really mishandled film properties.
That's what we went with. Yeah, I think we had to narrow it down.
Yeah.
Do you want to get into now how we kind of got to the list? Or?
Yeah. Well, talking about narrowing it down, it was kind of hard to come up with a criteria to use.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of movies that I feel maybe, or a lot of series that I feel they could have done better in one way or another, but I still really enjoy it.
Yes.
Just to name one, the Puppet Master franchise. I love the Puppet Master franchise. It's terrible. The movies are generally they're bad movies.
I may have seen one of those and probably like in the middle, like turned it on at a hotel or something at some point and been like, what on earth is this?
The latest film, I don't know if this was the last one, but the last one I saw was called The Littlest Reich. And it was at like a toy fair. And it was just a bunch of Nazi puppets. It was horrible. It was a horrible movie.
It's like that.
But I wouldn't include that because that's kind of what I expect from the franchise.
Yeah. No, that's its marketing scheme
Right.
is to be just awful and stupid.
Yeah.
It's like the what are they Iron Sky movies or
Yes,
something where
yes.
there's like dinosaurs, Nazis riding dinosaurs on the moon and stuff, and I'm like, you watch it just because it's it's going to be terrible.
Yeah, so definitely films that kind of know what they are and they're kind of cheesy and may B grade film. Those don't apply.
Yeah.
These are franchises that started off strong, had ambition, but just flopped.
Yes.
According to our perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. We stayed away from Star Wars and Marvel.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I think the way I narrowed it down is what I was looking at had to be at least a trilogy.
Okay.
Because I think we've mentioned before how much I love like the Dark Tower book series.
Mm-hmm.
They made one movie. It was gosh awful, but that doesn't count because they didn't do anything else with it.
So yeah, I would also say Valerian and the City of 10,000 Planets.
Yeah, those are
that. I have my feelings about that movie, but it was one film. I can't really.
What was the other big Disney? John Carter.
John Carter, yeah.
I mean, it was
same thing.
Things that probably could have been a franchise, but they just were so bad that they didn't turn into one.
This could probably be its own topic at some point. You know, films that should have been huge franchises, but didn't.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about it beforehand too. That anything that pretty much was intentional destruction of a property instead of just poor management of it. Yeah. Is another thing that we kind of use to eliminate it. So we're not going to be talking about anything to do with Star Wars or Star Trek or any of that because
Star Trek.
Those became little political hotbeds of people, of activists taking a show and just trying to turn it into something that it was never intended to be. So that kind of stuff, we kind of eliminated those from consideration because the properties we're going to talk about, and I think you'll see it when we actually list them, were ones that were on a really good track, sometimes had some amazing films in them, but maybe tried to go too long or just didn't know how to end or went into a different direction or a director and kind of fell apart then, something like that.
And we ended up with a pretty mainstream list. Like there's really no obscure films on here.
If you can't tell the area or the era that we were born in by our list.
Yeah. Right.
I think you could probably like reorder our list chronologically and figure out like how we got into science fiction by just the movies that we ended up picking.
I'm definitely looking forward to getting into those.
Yes.
And then after that, what's your dessert?
My dessert is at the moment just Invincible.
Okay. Is there something coming up for that? Is the next season?
Well, it's just us catching up to it, I guess, at this point.
Okay.
I think the season's already been out for a little while.
January, right? Season 3?
I think so.
Okay.
It's been at least a month. But we're really one entree at a time eaters. Yeah. When it comes to doing shows, and we're still trying to get through some other stuff. So, but we're just about done with Sons of Anarchy, so that's on our list to do next.
Likewise, my desserts aren't for the immediate next. It's not stuff coming up in the next month. Yeah. It's stuff that I've wanted to get to for a long time. Gunsmith Cats. I've ordered an omnibus, and we'll talk about that. Yeah. And the Evangelion, however you want to pronounce it.
I would say Jillian. I'm sure that's wrong, but I'm in Southwest Virginia, and that's my right.
That's right. I'm going to I've been wanting to go through that series again, and I'll talk about why at that point.
Yeah. And the other thing I kind of factored into my dessert, just being that one little thing, is that I looked at what's coming up, and there's just not anything else new coming out that I have any interest in at all. It's pretty barren.
There were a couple of things, but nothing that was really making me feel like I needed to talk about it or share it or anything like that.
Yeah, there's some things that if they turn out to be good, might merit some discussion. But from what I've seen on the slate for most of probably what gets us through the summer is really not that exciting or interesting, honestly.
And one thing that with the organization of what we talk about, one thing I've kind of decided on my own, I haven't really talked to you about this, is for the stuff I want to talk about, like for the appetizers, I will want to wait until I finish a series. So like I was talking about the Rogue comic and the Gunslinger comic.
Yeah.
But those are ongoing.
Well,
once those miniseries, once they finish, then I want to talk about them again.
I think I've mentioned Bleach both times, and I'm still maybe a fifth of the way through it. So it's talking about it is just like, hey, I'm still watching it.
Right.
They're still sword fighting.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about for the appetizers. Moving forward, I kind of want to just put stuff on there that I'm done with, and I can.
I think we're in the same. We got there without even talking about it.
There you go. Yeah. All right. Well, that's our menu for today, and we're gonna start off with our appetizer.
And do we want to start with the food appetizer or the show appetizer?
Let's do the show. We'll do the shows.
Okay.
And then we'll do the food before the main course. And
well, I didn't say that I hadn't watched anything. My appetizers, I tried watching some things that I thought might be topics, and it was all crap. I saw Monster Hunter was on either Hulu or Prime.
I've been wanting to see that.
Watched it.
Terrible.
I turned it off.
Terrible.
We won't get into that any further than that.
How far did you get into it?
Where Ron Perlman shows up looking like he's a live action character from a bad He-Man show. I was just like, nah.
I didn't know he was in that movie.
It was so bad up to that point. I think I had texted you a little bit about like watching the Hellboy Crooked Man.
Yeah, you told me about that.
It was okay, not really worth discussion. It literally was like watching an episode of a series, but it was a movie. I watched 45 seconds of the War of the Rohirrim at the hotel.
Seconds? Okay.
It started off with like this little speech that was like, before Bilbo, there was a girl, and she could ride a horse before she could walk, and by her hands.
Oh, that's the animated Lord of the Rings.
Love the concept of doing animated properties. It said, she could ride a horse before she could walk, and by her hands, great deeds were done. But don't look for her story, because no man would write it. And I was like, click. Not watching that. So
I kind of wish that they had done it in the style of the 1978 film.
Yeah, I've got those over there on the cabinet. That one just stops basically at Helm's Deep. It doesn't go beyond it. It's just like, and they had many other adventures after they repel the attack on Helm's Deep. They just leave out the whole destroying the ring last part of it. But yeah, those were an interesting
sounds like
style.
They could finish that off.
It was like that.
Rotoscoping. What
is that, like heavy metal?
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like the little bit of animation was like some of the stuff they used in that. That was a film, wasn't it? The heavy metal movie.
Yeah.
Or there was a couple of them. But
well, there was one in the late 70s and there was one in the 90s.
Oh, there was a thing that came out on AMC Plus. Didn't we actually watch it? Or maybe I'll accidentally let you my login so you could watch it too. At one point, they released like a new show, and I cannot think of the name of it. That was in that style. It was that old style.
I do not know.
I'll have to try to dig that out for another time. But anyway, back to the appetizers, because my attempts to find some other content kind of all fell on its face. And I was on the road because we were at Lexington Comic-Con in Lexington, Kentucky. And then or maybe 2 weekends later, I was just out of Kansas City, just got back from that. So I was in a van for like the past almost 3 weeks. Did a lot of podcasting. And then in hotel rooms, watched stuff on YouTube. Podcasting, I got into this thing called the Haunted Cosmos.
Okay.
And have really gone down some rabbit holes of ghosts and aliens and all sorts of other things. Of course, I think I'm jumping out of category.
Yeah.
But, I looked them up because of hearing people always talk about MK Ultra and literally just didn't understand what it was. So I found a podcast that focused on that, and that's the first thing I listened to on them. And it got into, the assassinations of Martin Luther King, JFK. It got into Dulles, the guy who was head of the CIA in the Cold War era through the 60s and stuff like that. Got into Charles Manson, Whitey Bulger. Basically, the whole concept is like the movie The Manchurian Candidate. It was our government actually trying to actually do that, achieve that. And then from there, I just started kind of hunting their other shows, and I got into the Skinwalker Ranch, which is kind of related to our
the show, right?
Our Dan to Dan, our first podcast, where you get into a lot of cryptics and cattle mutilations and stuff like that. And
so the podcast is like general paranormal
stuff. They'll basically read you like a story that I think they write. It's just kind of some summary of an account of something happening.
Do you know if that's based on actual like reports from people, or is it okay?
Yeah,
it's not just fictionalized.
No, it's they sort of write a concise retelling of a series of events and a story they can relate to you. And then they kind of come on and sort of talk about it a little bit more. And I mean, I've been through Skinwalker Ranch, Göbekli Tepe, the pyramids, like weaponized viruses and toxins and ticks, and UFOs in a lake in Russia. So I've been all over the place, but it's pretty fascinating to listen to. Some of it's pretty far-fetched, kind of crazy stuff, but that's been what I've kind of been buried in for most of the time. And the other one, I think I jumped us out of order there. If you want to go back to that big...
Yeah, we'll go back to that, but I want to talk about Theories of the Third Kind. It's a podcast that I've been listening to for years.
Okay.
Sounds very much like similar kind of content.
I've even heard them reference other podcasts that so-and-so, when they talked about it on their show. So I guess it's a popular genre of stuff. It's just one that I haven't gotten into because I just haven't.
I'd be curious to know if there's really a reason to listen to multiple of those kinds of podcasts. Because I'm sure they're all sourcing off the same information.
I would imagine. It probably just depends on finding one that you like how they present it and stuff. And I do like they put music to it and they have little sound effects and stuff like that. It is kind of decent to watch on YouTube because they try to give you something visual with it too. But it's an interesting selection of stories, they'll kind of hit everything that happens around this, like if this area is reporting a lot of activity or a lot of problems or whatever, they'll get a lot of different accounts from sometimes military, people that live there, people that visited there, kids that had something happen. So it's one I'd have to say I'm kind of hooked on now. There's enough other things I've seen. I looked back at some of their early ones where they go through like the Mothman and Bigfoot and stuff, and I just have never really sat down and listened to very much of that. So
I'll give it a listen. I'm always looking for more audio only podcasts.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's they really don't kind of get into anything political. It really is just sort of. I mean, this last one is like Lake Baikal in Russia, which is like this deepest freshwater lake, in the world. It's like 2 miles deep, and just. I've never even heard of it, and they had all these stories and stuff around it. So you do kind of learn about some areas at least. A lot of it's probably made up stories and hoaxes and things like that. But it's anything when you get to be my age, anything that's like a new little pocket of information that you've never heard before is always intriguing for me, I guess.
I recently made the comment because I saw a video of square waves. Have you heard of these things?
No.
It's where like two in the ocean, like ocean waves, where two wave systems meet and they form like a square looking wave. Something I'd never seen before. And I felt like the world got a live update when that happened. I'm like, I've never heard of this before. Now it's this thing that in my reality never existed. Now it exists. So it's like the world got an update. That's what it felt like.
That's
learning new information like that feels like that.
I was listening to one about like accounts from Vietnam. After like listening to the Skinwalker Ranch and after listening to this thing about like this lake in Russia, and it's amazing how many accounts kind of describe some of the same things happening, and especially from time frames, in the 50s and 60s where there's no internet, and it's not like these guys in Russia got online and say, hey, we heard about this thing in Utah, let's do something here. It's just orbs and 9-foot tall beings and things that are, I don't know what honestly I think about them. I haven't kind of formed an opinion on it, but it does have one of those things that could just kind of have you scratching your head. It's like, well, that's kind of odd that kids in a cave in the Philippines and some divers in Russia and some ranchers in Utah all described almost the exact same thing. Almost the exact same thing. And I'm like, that's interesting and mildly frightening.
There's a lot of that kind of stuff where you have similar phenomena across the globe, and even the structure of the pyramids.
Yeah,
and that's I know the pyramid. These kinds of podcasts love the pyramids.
We could do a podcast on the pyramids.
Oh, yeah.
Just from what I've listened to on this. There's a whole system about how they basically harnessed, I think, electricity through sound.
That's what they're saying. Something like that.
I'm just like,
have you heard the latest news about the pyramids?
Yeah,
They've done some scans like underneath the pyramids, and apparently there are these like columns or tubes or something that go way deep into the ground, and then there's like a chamber at the bottom.
Well,
so there's new stuff happening.
Yeah, there was like I
That's
don't remember
more
the
content
note.
for that podcast.
It's like an F sharp note or something could be resonated through these tubes, or maybe just by making a sound in the tube, it turned into like an F sharp thing. It would vibrate stuff in the walls at a certain vibration that would start to generate, because the way the walls were insulated, it would start to generate like electricity. And I was just like, that blows my mind.
You were talking about just different sightings of orbs and whatnot. Have you ever heard of the 1561 Nuremberg battle?
No.
All right, it's real brief. Basically, in Nuremberg in 1561, there was this phenomenon that the whole city witnessed in the sky, where there were just these like orbs and ships that were like battling each other, and it was like a celestial war just above the city. Now, do you know what a sundog is?
I don't.
It's pretty much like a lens flare that's just in the atmosphere.
Oh, okay. When you say sundog, I was thinking back to like a pharaoh kind of.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No, it's an optical phenomenon.
Okay.
That's what skeptics say. They say, well, they just saw some sundogs, but like these people are actually saying like they saw these orbs that were falling out of the sky and stuff like this. Like it was a battle. And it's like, what?
I'm done listening to experts explain anything.
Well, yeah.
Experts are like, yeah, nothing blew up, and that's why we're here. Okay, gotcha.
But I will be surprised if they never talk about this. It is a fascinating incident.
Yeah.
Another thing that I listen to or watch is called the Y Files. You ever heard of that?
No.
Okay, I'll send you a link. It's on YouTube. I love this guy's presentation. And pretty much what he does is he gives you the information of what people say, and then afterwards, and it's very like matter of factly, this is what was said.
Yeah.
And then he'll kind of give his take on it. So
That's
sometimes
kind of how the Haunted Cosmos one goes.
Okay, so sometimes he'll talk about the incident or the phenomenon or whatever he's talking about, and it's like the way he's presenting it. It seems like he's 100% on board, and then at the end he's like, "Nah, it's bunk, and here's why." Well, that's great. And he has this little fish sidekick. It's this little animated fish that he voices. I think it's him.
Okay.
And you could tell there's a whole like team that's working with him for all of this. It's really high production value. I'll send it to you.
That's what got me with the Haunted Cosmos. Is one of the ones that was kind of, it was like a 3-part thing with the Skinwalker Ranch. I'm like, I've seen some stuff on Hulu about that. I'm gonna go back and watch it. I turned on, there's like a History Channel show on it, and I've watched one of them, and I'm like, gosh, cable TV was so bad. It's like what they did was really enthralling and kind of drew you in on the podcast, and then you watch like these guys that are like, you can tell that they're actually literally running like 15 feet, acting like they're running from to something that just happened, but it was like, hey guys, quick, run over there. Like the production of the cable stuff is so bad.
Back in the early 2000s, I liked those kind of shows, but when nothing ever happened, that's just the...
Well, they end the episode on, here's going to be the reveal, and then you have to, I can't imagine back then having to wait like a week or whatever to just be like, nothing. It was nothing.
When once you realize that if any of these guys ever actually found something, you would have heard about it like on national news.
Yeah.
It kind of ruins some of the mystique about the show.
Yeah.
So you got to go in knowing they're never going to find anything. I'm here for the little ride that they're going on.
The Skinwalker Ranch thing, they were kind of making fun of the guy from the show, like doing impressions of him. And I thought they were kind of being hyperbolic, but he literally sounds like the Dana Carvey impression of George Bush.
That's great. Okay.
And once you kind of have that in your head, you can't focus on anything that the guy says. Nice. Because I'm just picturing that from the old Saturday Night Lives from the 80s and 90s and stuff. So.
Let me talk about the film I saw, Ash. So because it's cosmic horror, That's the reason I said it's interesting that you had the horror podcast or the cosmic podcast, and we'll go back to other things
we can't like about. Keep putting that big round face up and not talk about it.
We'll talk about it. All right, so I went to go see Mickey 17. I wanted to see that.
Yeah, I wanted to, and then of course it didn't take long for reviews to be like, what happened here? I
haven't heard any reviews. I haven't watched any reviews. I still want to see it. To me it looks fun, and I'm fine with a subpar film. Yeah. But on the way there, I was sitting at a red light, and I was looking at what time what time does it start? And I like to get to the theater about 15 minutes after a movie starts to try to get past as many previews as I can. And I was at about 25 minutes. About 25 minutes late. I was like, see, I might miss the beginning of the film. Well, this other movie, Ash, was starting like right when I got there. And I looked at the poster, and it's just this huge red sky with some like astronauts at the bottom. And I'm like, cosmic horror? Yes, please, thank you. So I jumped in. I was like, I'll see this, no problem. It is directed by a man named Flying Lotus. He is that is his pseudonym, of course. He is a record producer, composer, and a rapper. As far as I could tell, this is like his first feature-length film. I think he did some like a mini-series before, or whatever. But as a director, he's fine. He did a great job. He actually played one of the characters. I didn't realize this until I looked him up. He played one of the characters, and slight spoiler, he's like one of the first people to die. Which is I found amusing because you know the horror trope of like the black guy dies first.
Yeah.
Well, he's like the one black character, and he dies first, and I'm like, I thought we were past this, but that amused me and made me think about Scream and all the tropes and whatnot.
Maybe just had to get back to directing.
That might have been it. An aside of you ever seen Tropic Thunder?
Yeah, it's been a while.
I recently heard just a snippet about Ben Stiller having issues. When he was playing the character, because he's directing the film, he's playing the character interacting with the actor who's playing the director of the film in the movie. So when he didn't know when Ben Stiller when he said cut, the actor playing the director didn't know if that was Ben Stiller saying cut or if it was the actor telling the director to cut.
I should have just filmed all that. It just would have been better.
I'm sure it's in some deleted scenes or something.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was very happy with the direction of the film. It was a beautiful film. I'm assuming he was the composer as well because he's a composer. If not, great music. The writer was Johnny Remler, and he's got like one thing in his past called Das Quartet. It was a miniseries. No idea. Never seen it. Know nothing about it.
Yeah.
The movie was about as predictable as movies can be. You watch it, and then like the first 10 minutes, you're like, oh, well, this and this and this. Yeah, totally. It was exactly what you thought.
Yeah.
It tried to be this like amazing twist at the end, but no, you call it.
Did it go though visually like, and with the music and stuff? Was it trying to do kind of like Mandy? Like that kind of thing?
No. I was expecting it because of the poster. I was expecting to be kind of like the Color of Space, that kind of thing. But it really wasn't.
Very kind of similar to Mandy too. Color of Space. Even if those movies are predictable, I like watching that kind of stuff because the visuals and when you add in some like not like a rock opera or something, but like you add in a lot of like cool music and let that kind of be a character in the movie too. I like that kind of stuff.
Not really. It mostly, almost entirely takes place inside of not really like a space base on another planet.
Okay. So
it is very claustrophobic in those areas. They could have done more with the visuals. It was a pretty movie, but they did kind of fall flat. I would recommend it for someone who likes. I think it was a Shudder. Is that the name of the production company?
Yeah, the horror. It's part of it. AMC owned that. It's basically like the little mini. It used to be its own like thing, and I think it's part of AMC and AMC Plus and all that stuff. But yeah, it's it's a horror studio, and kind of a lot of times they produce better horror movies than most of what anybody else ever turns out, because it seems like they they really do look for unique stories and aren't afraid to do something weird. Sometimes they're really weird. I had it for a little while. We had AMC Plus because
I remember you let me use it.
Were we using that for? I think maybe to watch Better Call Saul or something.
Yeah,
I think that's the reason that we got it. But then you saw, it comes with Shudder too, and then you start seeing all these like weird horror movies. But some of them are really good. Some of them are just kind of mental trash. But I mean, most of what they do is actually pretty solid.
That is this studio, and if you're familiar with the Shudder films, it's a Shudder film, and that kind of gets you on the level where you're
when you get into the supernatural stuff. Sometimes the CG effects and stuff are not great, but they're okay.
CG was good. I didn't have any complaints. The main actress was Isa Gonzalez. She plays a character named Rhea. I knew her from the Dusk Till Dawn miniseries. You ever see that?
No.
Great, fantastic. If you like the films, fantastic miniseries. Yeah. That would be, I think, the Dusk Till Dawn I would put in the series that did right by the first film.
Gotcha.
She also played in Baby Driver, Alita Battle Angel, Fast and the Furious, Hobbs and Shaw, and Godzilla vs. Kong. I think this is her first feature film leading role.
Yeah.
She did fine. She did a good job. The other main character is Aaron Paul. He plays Brian. Jesse from Breaking Bad.
I saw a trailer for that now that you say that.
Oh, really? Okay.
I did not put that together with that poster and
with
that
the poster.
Title. Yeah. I remember seeing a thing about him being in a movie. I watch a lot of trailers on YouTube when I can't find anything else to watch. And I remember seeing that, but I didn't even realize that was out in the theaters yet. I thought that was a later this year kind of thing.
He's one of those actors that I feel if you put him in the production, he raises the production value. Yeah. So I think, I wouldn't say he saved it, but he definitely brought something extra to the film.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out because
once it's on streaming, I think it's a good 2 hours.
Oh yeah. I went back and watched Life, the Jake Gyllenhaal thing, and it's those kind of movies I can rewatch those. Mm-hmm. You know, there's nothing groundbreaking there. It's pretty predictable, but they're enjoyable. And
fan theory, Life is the prequel to Venom. I like it. It's good. It's fun enough.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a stretch there.
A little bit. Tiny. But they did leave it open for a sequel. It'd be cool to get a sequel.
Well, you get into a movie like that too. Don't have to look all that up now, but I can't imagine that, production-wise, that was a super expensive movie to make. And when you get into those movies that are $10 to $20 million to make, they don't have to do but so good before they make a massive profit. If they turn $70 million after it's all said and done, they've tripled and quadrupled their money sometimes. So why not bring that back into another movie while it's there, which is going to be a big point I make when we get to our main topic on one of the things I want to talk about.
Now, my last comment about Ash was there was a point, I'm trying to stay away from as many spoilers as I can, but there was a point in the film to where it felt like a great ending. And then they continued. Yeah. And
it's the biggest problem with film today is that it seems like nobody knows how to end a movie.
Yeah. And there is this tendency for Western films to want to end on happy notes. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that really holds most Western films back is they always want to end on a positive note.
It's either that or end on some, the monster came back and got him in the end, thing. It has to be one or the other. It's like you can't always use the Ghibli movies as a way of sort of demonstrating how Japan and places like that can make a movie. They don't have to give you that little final explanation on stuff.
Right.
It seems silly to compare My Neighbor Totoro to a space horror thing, but I mean the whole story. It's the mom's in the hospital and she's dying of some sort of cancer type thing. She doesn't get healed. There's no magic thing at the end that fixes all that. It's just that the girl goes and has an adventure, and she comes back and she's with her family and they're happy, and the movie's done.
That's it.
It's not we didn't have to give you some resolution so you can go home and be satisfied that there's nothing else to think about. It's just, I think it's a different approach to movies that we have here. Like you said, they have to work in some satisfying either end thing or some gotcha end thing. And it's definitely
a different approach.
Yes.
I wouldn't say it ruined the movie, but like I could tell you like the minute, like stop watching the movie here and just there you go. That's the end, and it would be. I think it actually would have made for a stronger film. But anyway,
aliens.
Yeah. All right, so let's go back to sumo.
Yeah.
Like
pull back that picture of the big old
actual sumo wrestling.
Yes.
Is what you're talking about? Okay. I didn't know when you sent me the information.
Yeah, we try to focus on sci-fi and anime stuff. There really is very few things that are still alive today that are any more Japanese than sumo. Is why I wanted to bring this up. It's sumo. Let me find my little thing here, as I can't remember the date that I wrote down.
It's funny that you're bringing this up because I have seen a couple of sumo clips recently, and one of them was a sumo wrestler who was like signing a sheet, but instead of signing it, he was just smacking his hand in a big ink pad. Yeah, you got some.
I got 2 autographs. Those are both Yokozuna autographs.
Yeah, he was just smacking a piece of paper. Yeah, that's pretty cool. You got some of them. Excellent.
Yeah. Sumo, I think they have it recorded. It started like in 720 AD, so it's been around.
Oh my goodness,
forever. They really didn't start doing it. It was kind of a mythical thing where they actually thought that there were gods that were fighting for territories of Japan. So some of it was kind of mythology and stuff like that back then.
Is that where like Ikki Towson, the characters in that show are like embodiments of like old warlords and stuff?
It's very possible. I don't know the show, but it became organized in like the 1600s, and since then it's been a thing that like a sport, and there's no sports that we watch or consume that have been going on since the 1600s. You know, that's some of the Olympics stuff, I guess, maybe Greco-Roman wrestling, things like that, maybe. But we were in Japan in 2014. Just went to one day of it. Real quick, not to get into the long sumo story here, but they do a tournament every odd month, and it's 15 days, and it's like a round robin thing, so that you and I wrestle on day 1. If you keep winning, you start wrestling guys that have similar records. If I'm getting beat all the time, by halfway through the tournament, I'm wrestling another guy that's 2-8, and it goes on until you have somebody that is by record the definitive winner of the tournament. But we were there for just one day of that in 2014 and got hooked on it. And since then, we've been following it on YouTube, on NHK World. NHK World kind of came in like Toho with Godzilla and kind of shut down all kinds of YouTube channels that used to broadcast it and stuff like that. So I think Japan does like to protect their properties. But you can actually do that. We actually do it now through, there's the NHK World Japan app that you can get on a smart TV. But my favorite guy retired. He's a big Georgian dude that was just a monster. But my favorite guy right now is picture behind us, and this dude is like, he's my spirit animal.
Takayasu?
That's what he looks like when he wins. That's what he looks like when he loses. I always tell my wife, is like, he looks like a guy that ought to be running like a crane on like a dock or something. He's just this big hairy dude. He's 35, has been a runner-up 9 times, and they rank guys, you start at like 16 or 15, he's usually like the bottom guy in the top rank. And you try to work your way up, you get to this level where there's like komusubi and sekiwaki, which means you're on the verge of being of an ozeki. Once you're an ozeki, you have to maintain a certain record to hold that spot, and if you get enough wins, then you can get promoted to yokozuna, and that's grand champion. And once you're a grand champion, you can't get knocked off that spot. Basically, you wrestle, and if you start to perform badly, they expect you to retire and go away.
Oh wow!
Because if you can't represent, then you don't go on. And we've seen a lot of guys hit that spot, get there and collapse and be like yokozuna for less than a year. He was ozeki once, got his shoulder dislocated, and fell all the way back out of rankings and has come back up. Like, he's 35 now, 35 is an old guy in sumo.
You imagine.
Most of them get into it in high school. They actually have college championships and stuff like that. And the guys that are really good are these guys in their mid-20s and stuff. This tournament that just wrapped up on Sunday, he was in the lead, got tied, went back in the lead just by his record each day. Got to the last day, day 15, tied with one of these young guys that's just a monster. And he actually, the other guy was Onosato. Takayasu beat Onosato when they matched up on day 4, day 5. And it was an amazing match. It was one of the best matches I've seen in a long time. But he kind of got upset on like day 12 or day 13. He had a lead where all he had to do was just win out and he would have won the tournament. He got a loss and he had to wrestle the same guy in a playoff on the last day. And again, it was just an awesome match. It was at the edge. You win or lose in sumo by either getting thrown out of the ring or if you go down in the ring.
Okay, see, I knew about the getting thrown out of the ring. I didn't know about going down in the ring. Is it your knees hit or what? Something like that?
Knees, hands, anything hit. Like a big thing is like kind of pushing and slapping and stuff like that. A lot of times, if I'm pushing, some people try to grab your belt and wrestle you. Some people try to push and stuff. The guy that was my favorite guy before, Tochi Notion, he was this big Georgian guy. He literally would just kind of force his way in, grab your belt, and pick you up, walk you across the ring, and just set you out. That's how strong the dude was. Because these guys are not 180-pound guys.
They're 300, 400-pound guys.
The biggest guys are like 420, 430 pounds. And I've watched him pick one of those guys up. And of course, he had to get out of it because he tore his knees.
Yeah, I imagine so.
When you pick up guys, and it's funny sometimes in some of the Tochi Notion matches, though, you'd watch him, some of the smaller wrestlers, he'd get a hold of them and be picking them up, and you just see this little guy just kicking his legs all the way out, and he just goes set him out. As almost
little, in air quotes, little guy.
The littlest guys there are about 230 pounds, so they're bigger than I am. I could, frame wise, I'm probably bigger, but I haven't put on weight on purpose like they do. But anyway, he got to the playoff with this guy Onosato. They went right to the edge, and he just couldn't hold him and stepped out first. So he's like, I think that was his 8th or this one was, I think, might have been his 9th time of being a runner-up. He still never won one, and he's kind of at that point too where those chances are getting few and far between. So it was very, very heartbreaking. I was finishing watching it because we're always a day or two behind. Martha was watching it too. She finished it a couple days after I did. And of course, she sent me a text like the little crying emoji when she finished it. And I was like, I'm right there with you. But I think, did I send you a picture of like the Banzuke, the little list?
You did. Yes, we'll go back to that.
That just kind of.
I didn't know where that would go. There you go.
It kind of fits in like the. That was kind of like how they rank out. You know, like the Y's, the Yokozuna. There's a couple of Ozeki. Those are the guys that are the next step down. Then there's just guys ranked all the way down, and that's how the tournament kind of starts. You wrestle guys in your area. You know, if you're a bottom guy, you wrestle another bottom guy, and then as your records start to improve, then you start to match up against each other, and it just kind of all works itself out over 15 days. But it's
so a season's only 15 days.
A tournament.
The tournament.
It goes all year, and like I said, it's every odd month.
Multiple tournaments throughout the year.
And when you're in these top 2 divisions, you're salaried. I don't know what. There's like 8 divisions of people. I don't know how if you make any money at all, or if you just live in these places and they sort of take care of you in these. They call them stables, and it's like a big house where all these guys live, and they're very young guys. You know, they're making the big. It's like chanko, the big soup, the stew they make. That's like this 4,000 calories stew. That's how they put on weight. And younger guys have to clean and sort of work their way up and all that stuff. But I know when you get in those top 2, you're salaried, and then every match too is like in the top division is sponsored, or most of them are. You'll see these guys come up and walk around the ring. They've got these big banners, and those banners are representing. It's not like a wager, but it's just money that's to the winner from different corporate investors and stuff like that. People that sponsor the thing.
Can't help but thinking if this was in the West, that they'd have like patches on the belts that they wear.
Oh yeah.
For the sponsors.
Yeah.
Like Pepsi.
They'd have some kind of bodysuit or something.
Or something, yeah.
They look like a human NASCAR or something. But there's some guys, you know, some guys, their whole thing is trying to get ranked up so they have a chance to be Yokozuna. I think there's some guys that are just, they try to stay, and that's, you can get knocked out of the salary divisions if your records get bad enough. I think there's some guys that just kind of come out and try to get 8 wins.
So is there like a salary and prize money?
Yeah, like sometimes if it's going to be like an upset match, if I'm ranked number 8 and you're the Yokozuna, there'll be a big old stack of envelopes that's there, and whoever wins gets that. And I guess it's just a cash prize in those things, and they hand it to you there right after the match. They sit there and bless it, pick it up, and walk out of the ring with a big old stack of cash. So
nice.
It's
so the current tournament has just ended.
Yes.
When's the next one? In 2 months?
This was March. April, so it'll be May. Yeah, they'll be back in Tokyo in May. This was in Osaka, and they kind of go Tokyo to a city, back to Tokyo to another city. They go to Nagoya, Osaka. They go up north to a city, I can't remember where it is. They go up there, but it's one of the most fascinating things to do. If anybody ever goes to Japan, you should try to schedule it while that's going on and go see it, because even if you could care less about the sport, I think it would pique your interest. There's a lot of tradition in it. There's everything they do is, all the stomping and clapping that you see. It's kind of almost sort of like a meme thing, the way we look at it, or things that are traditional, like trying to
slap the thigh, raise the foot, boom.
It's trying to get the attentions of the gods to cheer for you or support you, and they throw salt into the ring to try to get bad spirits out of it. And
always assumed it was for traction. I always thought that.
Yeah, so it's always
interesting.
There's all these little parts of it that are, if you can find somebody that can we got really lucky when we were there. We sat next to a Japanese couple that spoke English, so they were explaining all this stuff to us, and then we're kind of passing it down the line. Our kids were a little bit younger. My wife was talking to them. She would tell me, I would tell them. It was just a little chain of information that was going the whole time. And
so is your man Takayasu going to be in the next tournament?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he's there until, like I said, he either retires or if he gets. Most of these guys, if they get to this age,
yeah, you were saying
if they ever lose out of this top division, they usually just retire.
Okay.
Because it's like they're gonna hang in there and collect money as long as they can. And he's actually wrestling really probably as good as I've ever seen him wrestle. He's really, really a powerful dude. I mean, it's one of those things I'd love to get closer to them and meet them if we ever get back to Japan. It's kind of like the same way I met Don Fry, the old MMA guy, at a Godzilla show at a G-Fest. And you just don't really have a real concept for people like that, those kind of athletes, until I shook Don Fry's hand. He's a guy that's knocked people out for his career. Mm-hmm. You shake a guy like that hand, and his hand
shaking a rock.
It's just like a big block of concrete at the end of his hand. It's like, I can't imagine even taking a shot from that dude, much less taking hundreds of them. And the same thing with them. It's like they look like a big old doughy fat guy. Mm-hmm. But I can't imagine how. I mean, you'll see them when they fall, the ring is elevated like 3 feet. They'll get knocked out of the ring, and it's like, I sit there and think, if I fell 3 feet off of this thing, I'd break everything in my body. Those guys will tuck and roll. I mean, they're athletic. They'll do splits and stuff, and I'm like, man, I can't even hardly tie my shoes.
Now, would you say that MMA is sort of the Western equivalent of this?
Oh yeah. There's some of these guys have come out of it. If there's any names that you ever recognize from sumo, it would probably be Akibono. That was a guy back in the 80s. He was I think the only American grand champion. Yokozuna. He was a Hawaiian, but he became Yokozuna there, and he later turned into like a WWF career or WWE. I don't know what it was at that point. And he actually fought some MMA stuff.
Well, that was one of the things I was thinking about while you were talking about it. Is some people might think, well, sumo is kind of like the WWE over here. Yeah. And I'm like, no, not really.
No, it's real.
Because WWE is loosely scripted, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But this is an actual sport. It's not a spectacle.
Yeah.
MMA, I guess the mixed martial arts doesn't have the history though.
Because they're coming off of a line, and half the time there was a guy who retired because he got so many spine injuries. Favorite nickname I've ever heard. People called him the Combat Wombat.
Combat Wombat, nice.
Because he literally was just like a ball that had feet. But he would come off the line so hard and hit people, and half the time he's headbutting them. And I think he got into concussion problems, and obviously caused other people to have concussion problems. And
With headbutts.
I don't know how many times you would see him or one of his opponents for the rest of the tournament. They'd have like an open wound on their head that they were trying to keep bandaged. It would always get opened up every match, and they're sitting there bleeding all over themselves. And it's a brutal sport, and it's one of those things too. With it being in Japan, it's like you don't sit out a game because you're injured. It's like you're kind of shamed if you come and say my leg hurts today.
Right.
You'll have a guy there was a guy through this tournament. He's a guy we saw as he was younger, and he's getting into his 30s now. And his name's Endo. After every match, he was just laying there, almost looked like he was dead. And I don't know if he was having a concussion problem or if he had some other kind of injury, but he'd get back up and wrestle each day. And it was one of those things, if I was like his coach, or if I was a football coach or something, I'd be like, dude, you're coming out of the game. You're not going back in. But they're...
Well, speaking of shame, you said that once they get to a certain point on the ranking, and if they lose at that point, that's usually when they retire.
Yeah.
So when that happens, do they retire out of shame, or is it still considered like, well, you're retiring, you recognize where you're at, and it's an honorable thing to retire?
I think it's most of the time that they're like, I know I can't do this at the level that I should anymore, or that I want to anymore, so I'm going to retire. And most of the time, because they're part of a stable, they'll come back and work for that stable, either as a coach or something like that, or they'll get into broadcasting it, or some of them, especially the guys who actually make it the grand champion, will become basically ringside judges.
So they're still revered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the ones that I've seen shamed out of it. There's a lot of and you don't get this here because we don't have access to Japanese news very much. There's a lot of hazing and stuff that goes on in these stables.
Oh.
And there's been accusations about hazing and some people being pretty brutal to other people. And I've seen some of the people that actually were pretty promising wrestlers kind of get shuffled out of the whole thing by there's a sumo association. I guess it's a lot of the stable masters and former wrestlers and, a board that manages everything and all that kind of step in. And that's the only time I've ever seen people kind of shunned away from it. And there was a lot of stuff going on back during the whole pandemic thing where if they were out partying at a bar and didn't have a mask or something like that some of those guys were getting sanctioned and they were getting banned from tournaments. And if you get banned from a tournament, you don't wrestle, you're turning in an automatic 0-15 record that time. So you get bumped down. There'd be some guys, even guys that just get legitimately injured and can't wrestle. By the time, if they have to take 6 months off the heel, they'll come back into Division 5. And they've got to wrestle their way all the way back up. They've got to win Division 5 tournament to get to 4, and then so on to 3 to 2 to get back into their salaried spot. Wow. And that could just be because I dislocated my shoulder falling off the 3-foot ring that y'all make me wrestle from. And it's a fascinating sport. And once you kind of get into it, you find people that you like, and you find bad guys too that you don't like. And it really is, in that aspect, it's like WWE. We're sitting there watching it at our kitchen table, and cheering for and against people and stuff like that. So, but yeah, Takayasu is a beast, and with that dude's face, anybody that can actually see this, he's just epic looking.
Well, good luck to him in the next tournament then.
That's his excited face.
Yeah. All right, so the only other thing we got to talk about for the appetizers is Extraordinary. This is a series watched on Hulu. There's 2 seasons, and if anybody watches this, it ends on a cliffhanger. There's no resolution. There's supposed to be additional seasons. No, there's nothing.
Nothing.
I even tried to look up, well, what were they planning? Because sometimes you can find out, they'll say, well, this is what we wanted to do, and you gotta get some closure there. No, nothing. I can't find anything on it. The basic premise is, in this world, everyone has superpowers. The main character, Jen, doesn't have superpowers. And apparently this is an issue where sometimes people's superpowers are like they're a late bloomer sort of thing.
Is that not it was a little bit My Hero?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
yeah.
It seems like there's another anime thing that sort of jumps out like that, but I can't think what it is.
I wouldn't be surprised if the person who wrote this was inspired.
The Solo Leveling? Is that one?
I'm not familiar with Solo Leveling. I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar with it.
I think that's a more recent show that I want to track down, but yeah,
Okay.
Go ahead. I know that premise seems very anime to me.
The humor of the show, the basic themes and whatnot, that's right up my alley because it's a British show.
Okay.
I grew up on like Monty Python, Keeping Up Appearances, Are You Being Served? I mean,
whose line is it? The real whose line
the
is
real
it?
Whose Line Is It? I grew up on British comedy.
Yeah.
So I very much identify with that.
Here's a non sequitur for you. Hopefully you'll get this reference. No,
We'll see.
We'll stay off the
Go
details. Told you I had to have my 50-year-old colonoscopy here about a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor that performed that, I swear, looked like Tony Slattery.
Nice.
I told one of the nurses there, who's a male nurse, he's like, "You're older than I am." That's a reference that's older than me. I'm like, look it up sometime. You'll appreciate it.
So in the show, you just follow Jen where she's trying to get her powers, and it's just the issues that arise because she doesn't have them. Her character arc is really all about that. Everything she does is her trying to get her powers out of her. She has a friend, Carrie, her roommate. She can summon the dead.
Okay.
Like they can embody her.
They're a little bit like X-Men type things. They can be pretty random.
The premise for the powers is when you turn 18, your powers manifest. And that was one of the comments I was going to make about it. Is the show is very safe. It is a safe show. Yeah. There's no.
Well, that's probably the British.
That's probably the British. Yeah, there's no boundary pushing. I don't think when it comes to British comedy. There's some stuff that some Americans might find a little crass. Like one of the characters you meet early on is a man who, when his skin is touched, he can make anybody orgasm immediately. So it's got some crassness to it, but it's like safe crass. And the fact that the age that everybody gets their power is 18 is never really explained. Like I could see it in world, I could see it be something like, well, when you get your power, we consider you an adult. And everyone gets their power usually by 18. So that's when we can. No, they don't really explain it all. It's just, well, when you turn 18, you get your power.
There's like a timer running and things.
Right. And I'm like, that really makes no sense. Yeah. The narratively, like the reason they would do that in the writing room is like, well, we don't want to give kids powers because that would be untoward. And I'm like, okay, that's you're making the, and that's one of my general complaints about movies and shows is when decisions are made for the show for the sake of some sort of outside reason, and there's no internal reason for it to be 18. They didn't even establish that, but I overlooked that. That's whatever. That's fine. So Carrie summons the dead of Jen's dead father. So that's one thing they'll do is she'll summon her dead dad, and that plays into Jen's larger character arc about like why she can't. It's kind of a case of Arrested Development.
Okay.
Why she was not getting her power because she's holding on to the past, all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
The boyfriend of Carrie, Cash, can rewind time. And out of all the superpowers, I always love time powers. It's very cool.
Just being able to freeze it would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Can rewind time like for a period, like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, not a long time. And his powers develop a little bit over time. There's a cat that they have that is named Jizzlord. And the reason they named him Jizzlord is because he touched the man who could make anybody orgasm. So again, it does have crass humor, but it's all very safe. I enjoyed the show, and as a lot of shows tend to do, when they go to after the first season is done and they get a second season, again, there's some decisions. I'm not going to spoil it, but there's some decisions made about characters that I felt were out of place. And again, serving something outside of the show. Yeah. And that kind of turned me off of the show. Just because I felt like it didn't make sense, again, for the characters and within the confines of the show. And the fact that it just ends, she never gets her power. You don't know what her power is going to be, what they wanted her power to be. No, there's no conclusion.
Yeah.
Which
I think that throws that onto the list of I don't think I'm going to try that one.
Yeah, that's one of those things where I kind of wish I knew. I'm fine with that. There's been plenty of TV shows that has happened to, where I'm okay with that being a part of the show, a part of the viewing experience. But I would really like to know it ahead of time, like just in the beginning, first episode comes up, just so you know, there's no conclusion to this.
Or you could write some sort of. You could still wrap that idea up somehow.
Well,
if you just end it, it's just like, okay.
There are some series that what they'll do is they'll go on and make like a comic book or something, and they still could do that for this. This was like 2023 and 24, so we could still see if there's interest. We could still see a comic series out of it, which I would read the comic series. I enjoyed it that much where if there was a season 3 in comic form, I would read it.
There was something that we saw. It was a French version, I think, and then they remade it here. It was with all these people that had died, like reappearing from a lake or something. It was like
no idea,
uninvited or something. But it was the same way. It's like they had this concept for a show, but I don't think it ever went. It may have just been as simple as it didn't get funded for any more, so they just stopped it or something. But I've kind of stayed away from some of those sort of foreign shows. I guess we used to have IFC, maybe it'd be where I would see some of that kind of stuff, or one of those channels. Or maybe back a while ago, they actually used to show those. I don't know what they show now, but it seemed like there were a lot of shows I would encounter that would be like that. That would be interesting, but it never went anywhere. There was never a follow-up or a second season or any kind of conclusion, so I've kind of just stopped even looking for shows like that.
Well, unfortunately, I think that's with the Hulu, Disney Plus, Netflix, with these streaming services funding the shows. I think this was a Disney Plus funded show. I watched it on Hulu. That happens more often than not, it seems like, to where they have a show that's going and the cast has no idea. The people who are making it has no idea whether or not they're going to get another season.
I think I've told you a little bit about it. The Outer Range, Josh Brolin thing.
Josh Brolin's Hole.
The one that my family loves, that I nicknamed Josh Brolin's Hole.
Yep.
Fascinating show, and they even said he was advocating for another season for it and all that stuff, and they've just decided to not do it. And I think they just did it with the old man, the Jeff Lebowski, I can't think of who. Jeff Bridges.
Jeff Bridges. Okay. The actor.
Calling him by his real name, Lebowski. But the same thing with the old man there. That series was really strong, and I think still had some places to go. And they're like, nah, we're not going to do it anymore.
It was a shame.
But yeah, we get all these other nonsensical things that just, I don't know if it's just attention deficit disorder across the industry, or if they really are depending on, we have to have this result or we're just not doing it again. And we're just going to be constantly searching for another thing in hopes that we'll find the thing that will get us that result, even though they probably know going in that it's not going to. It's just a motion they have to go through or what. But
I would think at this point that the writers would write with that in mind. Yeah. Don't do cliffhangers. Try to tie up each season. And if you want to do a larger story that spans seasons, that's fine. I'm kind of thinking of like Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad. Like if you watch one season of that, it's pretty contained, the season itself.
Yeah, and you can't tell me that there wasn't some kind of agreement that's like, we're doing this to the end on a series like that, because I'm sure it waned at some point in people that followed it and stuff like that. And I don't remember how many seasons each of those were, but it almost seems like you couldn't make a show like that now and get it to run that long.
No, it would be if they made Breaking Bad now, I think they'd do like 10 episodes a season. Yeah, it would be a lot shorter.
Yeah, they'd probably be trying to squeeze it into like 3 seasons at the most or something, because Lord knows nobody has the attention span to watch any more than that.
You ever heard of Ozark?
Oh yeah.
I've heard about, how many seasons did that have?
We watched it all. I don't remember, 4 or 5.
Okay.
Maybe.
Well, according to Google, someone was asking, is there a 5th season of Ozark?
Yeah.
Did you watch all of it?
Yeah.
I've heard that compared to like as good as Breaking Bad, that kind of thing.
It was in the vein of Breaking Bad.
Did it tie up?
Yeah.
Okay. See that it says Ozark was canceled after its 4th season, so that's a good example where the story left you satisfied, but there may have been more. That's good.
I don't know what else they could have done. They would have had to. It's kind of like, so we're watching the Sons of Anarchy. They're kind of getting into the point where they're just killing everybody in the last season. So
no, it says the decision to end the Ozark was made by the creators who felt it was the right time to wrap up.
Yeah,
so that's great. See, that's how you want shows to end. Yeah. And it would be great if they
pull that back up for just 1 second.
Ozark.
It was her original first thing I've ever seen her in, and she's done a lot of stuff since. The Julia Garner
played Ruth.
Amazing amazing in that series.
Yeah, have you watched the Deadpool and Wolverine?
No.
Okay, I think she's the actress who played in that. She played.
I know she was just in the werewolf thing.
Okay.
Or the Wolfman that just came out. I don't think did very well, but yeah, she's kind of like
no, it doesn't look like she looks like that actress, not the same actress.
What's Walter's name? Bryan Cranston.
Bryan Cranston.
Yeah, you couldn't have had that show without him.
No.
And it's kind of the same way with Ozark. I don't think that show would have been anywhere near the quality that it was without her character. She was kind of like that one that's not a great person, but the one that you're kind of cheering for throughout the thing. And
I'm interested in not only because of the Breaking Bad comparison, but also Jason Bateman.
Oh yeah, no, he's very good.
He's fun.
But
I'm assuming he's not a fun character in this.
He kind of is. He's it's the same thing. A legitimate business guy that kind of gets into this bad situation that just really gets out of control bad. And Laura Linney, I really like some of the stuff she's been in. She was in she was like the attorney in that exorcism movie, and
yeah,
the one about the trial.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the actress.
And I like actresses that can do
the Truman Show, Exorcism of Emily Rose.
That's the one I was thinking. I like actresses that can do that thing where, and actors, where you like them and can kind of cheer for them in one movie, and then in a movie or a series like Ozark, you hate her, and she can control that sort of how you feel about the characters, and she is she kind of represents like everybody you imagine that's involved in politics, just a bad part of all of them, and obviously that makes you not like anything about the character.
There aren't many actors or actresses I would put the attribute of powerful on, but I think she's a powerful actress.
Oh yeah,
absolutely, yeah, very commanding presence.
Yeah, like I've seen her play both sides of good and bad, and she's good at both.
Okay. Well, that's it for the appetizer. What do we have for the actual appetizer?
So I walked into the Heritage,
of course,
market in Fincastle,
of course,
with kind of a plan to kind of go near where the pimento cheese and stuff was, and there in between it and the chicken salad that I think we had last time, there was a couple things of barbecue, and I'm like, well, I could pick up a barbecue. And I got to looking closer, and there was one that said barbecue with apple butter barbecue sauce. And I was like, we're doing that.
I like barbecue. I like apple butter. Let's see.
I have no idea what's going to happen there.
All right.
But it was intriguing to the point that I didn't look any further than that. I just grabbed that tub and walked back out and paid and left. So.
All right. Sounds good.
And we're not going to do any... it's one of those things I don't think you put it on anything. It's just going to be with a fork so we can get the whole impact of whatever's getting ready to happen. Because I think we need to sort of flesh out the flavors in this one.
That works. So, all right. Well, I'll see you back for the main course.
All right. All right, guys, we're back. We have had our first dose of food, actual appetizer. Maybe mixed reviews on that one.
Little mixed.
Very sweet. I think I was reading through the ingredients, and I think sugar was listed 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
With the sauce and the apple butter and the barbecue itself. I like a really sweet barbecue. I'm not sure it would be my choice of barbecues, but I enjoyed it. It was good.
I'm not against sweet meat in general. I think it's pairing the sweet with the savory. I think it's usually a nice pairing. I didn't get a lot of savory on this. It was mostly sweet.
I think you kind of nailed it. It's like you would prefer it on like a little Hawaiian, like little slider.
Yeah, like
Maybe
a
it's like
Hawaiian bread bun or something.
Like
that would be
as an appetizer.
Yeah.
As an actual appetizer, not a meal.
Have a little maybe sharp cheddar or something next to it.
Yeah.
I think that would be good. I don't think I would like a whole sandwich of that. I'd probably get halfway through and be like, ooh, this is too much.
I don't think I ever came away from any bites thinking apple butter. I guess it was just sweet.
No.
There's a lot of sugar and cinnamon. Yeah. But that's basically what apple butter is. So.
I did think, and I think this was just because the word apple is in it, I thought this would be good on top of an apple slice. I mean, it would be, but...
Yeah. I think if I was going to actually eat it on something, I'd just get like a plain pork skin and just eat it on that. But
there you go.
I'd be returning it back to its skin.
I was thinking about, as we were eating it, I was thinking about like a saltine cracker. No, not really. Graham cracker, definitely not.
No.
I was thinking of the different crackers you could put it on.
Yeah. I don't
maybe like a Ritz.
I don't think it even works on like a corn chip. I think it'd be I don't know. It's definitely, it was worth a try.
Yeah.
It's different.
I think I would choose a different barbecue if I was going to have more. No.
Yeah.
But thanks for bringing it. I enjoyed what we had of it, but
yes.
There you go. And now we're on to our main course.
Yes.
And our main course topic of discussion are properties that have been mishandled.
And as we said earlier, kind of got it narrowed down to, or at least in this discussion anyway, is going to be movies.
Right. Film properties.
Yeah.
And our first one is The Matrix.
Yes. Do you want to go through the list, or you just do them one at a time?
Let's just do one at a time.
All right, so this is actually ranked mine. I ranked a top 5.
Oh, okay.
And I cut stuff in and out of things, and The Matrix was my 5th one.
Okay.
And I ranked it there.
So this is the most mishandled. This is the 5th.
This is my number 1 is the most mishandled for me.
Gotcha.
This is, as getting it into my top 5, this was the one that just barely made the list.
Gotcha.
And I put it that way because, one, the first movie, if you're ever asking me what my favorite movies of all time are, mine 1 or 2, and it alternates between 2 movies back and forth, is always either The Matrix or The Fisher King.
Okay.
And so The Matrix is one of my 2 favorite all-time movies. I've watched it more than any other film that I've ever seen, more than my Godzilla stuff. There were times not too long after that movie came out that I had it on DVD that I would watch it once a week.
The Matrix was the first DVD I ever bought. It was before the PlayStation 2 came out, and I was building up my DVD collection for that.
I don't know that I've ever really tried to plot when we stopped buying VHS tapes and started getting DVDs, but I know Matrix was 99, right?
Yeah.
So it's probably not too much
right
before
around there. It was one. I think it was one, like, it was in the first like real batch of DVDs that came out that were at least popular.
Yes. And we talked about it before. I got into some of the comics or trades stuff that came off, and the Animatrix and other things that kind of accompanied it. So those just kind of bolstered that as this is my thing. And a lot of people didn't like the 2 sequels. I really enjoyed them. They were not as good as the first one, but still staying inside that world. I loved that first movie so much. I wanted more material from that world, and they gave you more stuff. They expanded it. They took you to Zion. They took you to the excuse me, I guess the oddest thing is always the architect scene in the second one with the guy that just sits there with a thesaurus and like heretofore, therefore, afterwards. It's like, okay, I get it that you're trying to make us understand that this is the smartest guy that's like ever lived or whatever, but that was probably the worst part of all of that. But
I liked it. I liked all the TVs and behind him that was showing him all the possible futures.
Yeah.
I thought
all of the concepts in the movie were cool.
Yeah.
The action stuff in it through all 3 movies, the main 3 movies, even in the second one with the car chase thing, I love that. I mean, once I found out how they actually did that, where they built a stretch of highway that was just out in the middle of the desert that they shot that on, so they could, and they had little ramps, the other cars, stunt drivers are doing all these stunts in the background of all this other stuff, and just made me kind of love that even more. And the third one, when you get into the dock and you had the guys in the suits. I think we said before how much I love mech stuff, and those are guys in suits fighting flying robots, and I was like, I never had any problem with any of those first three. And then came the fourth one.
let's stick with the first three, and let's put the Animatrix in there with it. Now, the Animatrix came out between the first and the second one, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's what my memory is.
Very much. I don't know. I wonder how close that was in time to Gendy's Clone Wars animated stuff that came out to bridge between the two movies, and actually at the end of the Gendy Clone Wars stuff, the last scene is actually where the Clone Wars movie picks up.
Right.
And that was kind of the first part of the Animatrix, the Flight of the Osiris, I think was what it was called, where she was trying to go drop the little message in the mailbox and get it to them to let them know about all the machines drilling to Zion. That was like the little piece that linked that, and then they came back and gave you I think the best part of the Animatrix was that 2-part thing that sort of gave you the history of it all.
Yeah, I agree.
I love that. I could watch that over and over.
Told you about the machine war and all that. Yeah.
You know, like even like the first trial of a guy who killed his robot, and how the robots revolted because of the way that the verdict in that trial went. And
now I also like from the Animatrix the story about the kid who jumps off the building. Yeah, and then he's that character is in like the third film.
I think at the end of that little cartoon, he wakes up to Trinity and Neo waking him up, and then he's the little kind of annoying kid that chases them around through Zion.
So for me, I saw The Matrix, and I mean, any middle-aged American man, I think, is in our same situation where The Matrix is in our top 5, at least top 10. Yeah. It was a cultural moment. The Matrix was.
It was bullet time. It was.
And it introduced a lot of like philosophical questions that I don't think at the time a lot of people were asking. Yeah. The Wachowskis really, they made a cultural mark, and that's saying something.
It was cyberpunk with everything just all mixed into all these little things that we had a little taste of. It was all of that in one movie.
Looking back on it,
it was a samurai movie. It was a western. It was all that. It was just
one of the lines I remember at the time. I found kind of hokey, but in retrospect, I kind of agree with it. The machine world was set in the 90s because that was determined to be the peak of human civilization. Yeah. Like at the time, I was like, "Oh, come on, we got better stuff coming up." Now I'm like, maybe.
I think maybe they might have been on that
one.
They
might have been on to something.
But kind of a side note, it's one of the things, and I don't understand how things kind of work universally and cosmically and all that stuff. This came out in 99. I grew up, graduated high school in the early 90s. My dad said to me over and over and over as I was a young teenager getting into driving and first jobs and everything, would always say, "I can only show you the door. You have to walk through it." And he said it.
Yeah, that's in the film.
Said it to me, I don't know how many different times. That was just his phrase. And that was years before that. And when that thing came out in the movie, I was just
blow your mind, man.
Yeah, I was like,
whoa. It's like, my dad's been telling me that forever.
It's like, they know my dad.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And that's another thing that kind of ties me back to that movie all the time, is he died in 2004. And that was a movie that he'd seen a little bit of, I think at like a Thanksgiving or a Christmas, and we had too many family members over that couldn't not talk through everything. And he sort of gave up trying to watch it because we couldn't actually hear it. I always wanted to get back and watch that movie with him, and he died before we ever did. I've always wanted to sit down and just watch that movie and talk about it with him, and kind of just see what his reaction would have been, because I know he didn't see the scene where Morpheus tells him where they're going to go see the Oracle, that I can only show you the door, you have to walk through it. I would just love to see the reaction on his face. But yeah. So I had a personal tie to that movie too, just for that little tidbit of coincidence or whatever you want to call something like that. I don't even know how you what category you put something like that in, but
I had a little bit of I don't know what it's called. I think maybe convergent creation or something like that, where the things that are happening culturally causes multiple people to come up with the same idea at the same time. So that's why we had like The Matrix, The 13th Floor, Dark City. We had all these movies that were dealing with existence and virtual fake realities and stuff like that. And in the mid 90s, my dad and I, when we were driving, going to and from school or errands or whatever, we would just talk ideas. And like one of the things we talked about a lot was I would love a video game where you start off in a space station, you can fly down to the planet. That was one of the things I said, and got that in No Man's Sky. It's great.
Yeah.
Also got that in Star Citizen. As an aside, No Man's Sky is like where I gravitate. He gravitates more towards Star Citizen these days. It's like an arcade versus a sim. But anyway, I digress.
I see on the picture of the Animatrix there too, the thing about the sprinter.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Love that one. That kind of ties back into one of my other movies I'll talk about, but just that whole power of the mind over everything else thing that kind of demonstrated where he was not even supposed to be able to even get up out of a chair, and he outran the agents, broke himself. Yeah, you weren't even supposed to be able to break out of the Matrix unless somebody kind of helped you.
Yeah, he forced himself out. That was cool.
Broke out with his mind, and I was through that time. I was just coming out of running cross country and track, and as an athlete in high school and college, and getting into police work where I was having to challenge myself physically a lot. And that was another one of those little what are those shorts? Are they 4 minutes long, maybe? If they're even that long.
Yeah.
Like 4 minutes of film that just became a thing that
You identified with it.
You identified with it and just thought about it all the time. And it was sort of like a motivational thing for you whenever you'd see it again. So.
And one of the things with the convergent creation, one of the things my dad and I talked about was an idea where what if we're all in a virtual world? And I think people thought that back then.
Yeah. One
thing we couldn't get was why. We couldn't get the idea of why would we be in a virtual world?
Yeah.
Who put us here? What's the purpose of it? And the idea that we are biomechanical batteries for machines.
They summed it up in the movie. You're a Duracell.
Yeah, I think that was a stroke of genius. I think that was a fantastic idea. Now, after I watched The Matrix, around the same time, it was 2003. You're right. It was the same year as the Star Wars animation. Same year. Around that same time was when the Final Fantasy movie came out.
Okay.
With the hypes at the time anyway, hyper realistic CG, and that was one of I think that was the Flight of the Osiris was the one that was hyper realistic.
Yes.
I think it was by the same studio.
Okay.
So essentially, the Animatrix for me set the bar too high for the subsequent films. I went into the second Matrix, the second and third films, really expecting something, and I did at the time. I felt let down by the films.
Yeah, I didn't like the fact that it was just it was a film that was just cut in half and given to us in two pieces.
Yeah,
it's like
the to be continued or whatever,
to
be concluded or whatever it said.
I think that could have been handled differently.
Yeah,
that doesn't really, like I said, I don't really have. That's why I put it back at 5, because those first 3, a lot of people kind of trashed the sequels. I enjoyed them. I mean, this is another little sidebar. I was really into cars back then because I was going through police academy. One of my goals was to be a driving instructor at the police academy, which meant you had to be really good at what you did. Eventually became one, but it was just it was like a car guy that didn't know anything about cars because I didn't grow up where I kind of wish you could have gone to vocational school and learned some of those things, but I had to go to the college track, so I didn't get to. So I was always sort of a closet car guy with no skills on cars at all. I wanted to so bad. Really, probably the first time I ever really noticed collectible figures, like expensive, high-grade collectible figures, as they did some Matrix things. I remember there was one of Trinity from the second movie falling out of the window, shooting back at the agent, and they're all had little arms so you could pose it in that scene. And there was one where one of the Sentinels was all wrapped out. I think where he's coming at Neo, where he touches it and shuts it off. They had ones of those, and I was like, man, I would love to buy something like that, but I've never spent that kind of money on a toy before, so I didn't. And I'd researched the car they drove around inside the Matrix, and I found that was I can't remember now. I've gotten old. It was either a 63 or 64 Lincoln Continental. I forget which year it was, which is the same. I think it was a 63. I remember it was the same car that JFK was assassinated in.
Is that, excuse me, was that intentional? I'm assuming it was.
I don't know. I don't know if they had any reason.
1965 Lincoln Continental.
Yeah. And he was in a, maybe it was 65 that he was in, but he was in a convertible. Of course, this was a hardtop. I got into looking at these things. It was like a 460 like cubic inch V8. It was like the first car that had like power windows and power locks and air conditioner. Car was massive, and I was like, I would love to just get one of those. Go get Morpheus' sword from the second movie and display it in the back window, and get those figures and take it to car shows and just have a Matrix car. But at the time, I was a police officer making $23,000 a year in the prospect of trying to track down a 65. 64, whatever it was, Lincoln Continental. Actually, that wasn't as bad now then as it is now. Like, it would have been like a $16,000 to $20,000 car back then. I think now those things are like $200,000.
Probably because of the Matrix.
I think it's more just older car collectible stuff. Like everything else has just gone insane in the last like 10 years. But that was a dream that was never achieved. But I don't know where I would have kept it. I think the car itself was something like it was almost 30 feet long. So I mean, it literally would have been like having two cars that you'd have to park end to end just to take it anywhere. And I think I measured like the trunk on one or something, or looked it up. I think you could fit like 5 or 6 6-foot tall people side by side in the trunk. It was like you literally could. You could put a basketball team in the trunk of the car, and they could all just sort of lay there next to each other and be like, "Hey, how you doing?" So, random, not anything about the movies, but that was just how much I was into that series back then.
It was a beautiful car. I really love the scene where they're in the car and it's raining and they get that bug out of them.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic scene.
All the cinematography and all of that stuff is crazy. I mean, it under the bridge when it's raining, the way they lit everything was just gorgeous.
One of the things I've always been critical of the second and third movie is I felt like the special effects, I don't know if it was because they got more budget, so they didn't have to hide it as much, or why it seemed more it seemed like it was false. Like the CG looked like CG more than it did in the first film.
Yeah.
I don't know what disconnect there was. I'm assuming it was that they got a bigger budget so they could do more CG.
Yeah.
And so it was just more
there were
apparent.
still a lot of practical effects in that too.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing
like
the
all the Smiths, all the Smiths were actually doubles.
If you go and watch that part with all the extra Smiths, that does get pretty bad. Some of the CG's not great there, but
the Neo CG, yeah.
You can see it too when Neo. You could just look at the face and be like, man, just needed to put some more detail in his face there.
Honestly, if I know people are really critical of the Star Wars special editions, but if I think any film I would like to see touched up, yeah. I would love to see Matrix 2 and 3 touched up.
What are the Mythbusters guys? They're Adam somebody. You remember
Adam and Jamie?
Yeah, the smaller one.
The one with the glasses?
Yes, well, I think they both did, but not the one that had like.
Oh yeah, not the beret.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. They did both have glasses.
He worked in miniature special effects,
yeah.
And I remember seeing a special or something about they built the Nebuchadnezzar for the scene where he comes back and crashes into the dock through the door.
Okay.
And it was a model that was about the size of this table and all miniature scale stuff. And they showed all the different camera angles of the way they had it set up, and they just ran it on a rail down through there, and all the stuff blew back. And I guess they went back and augmented it all with CGI on top of that. But still seeing those, they had miniatures of the little mechs and stuff too that were actually getting moved around. So it may have been one of the last eras of movies where they actually they mixed in practical miniatures and stuff like that with CGI before they just went full on CGI. But there's some amazing stuff in that.
Man, I'd like to have one of those little mech models.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
And I don't know if they stop motion those things or how they did, or if they just made the models and then plotted them into CGI. Or I never went that deep into seeing all that. But
do you do much like behind the scenes footage and stuff like that?
I don't even remember how I saw the thing about the Nebuchadnezzar crashing through the door. I don't know if it was on cable or if it was on extra on one of the discs that I had. Like I said, it's one of those things. when I just had DVDs and we watched them all the time, and I watched the same movies that we owned because that was how I watched movies. I would, while I was doing other things, just put one of the Matrix movies on and just let it run. And I've watched them so many times. I couldn't even give you a guesstimate of how many times I've watched those movies.
It's probably like everybody else with the behind the scenes with the DVDs. But when DVDs first came out, I'd watch the behind the scenes, I'd watch commentaries, all that.
Yeah.
Not so much anymore.
I even liked on those DVDs, like the menus had cool music on it. You could just like let the DVD.
Well, the menus were awesome.
You just let the menu run in the background, and just it'd be like your background music while you did something else all day. And
there was What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams.
Yes.
That DVD menu is like my favorite DVD menu of all time. It's just subtle, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, back to Matrix. Back to Matrix.
So I like the idea of the fourth one. The idea that they fixed everything. Everything kind of got reset, and Trinity and Neo went back to just being people in the Matrix, but still there was some kind of connection that they could remember, or that would draw them to each other. And if somebody who had the right frame of mind had made that movie, I would have looked forward to it. But whatever they ended up doing on that, it's one of those things I've tried to kind of purge from my memory. I don't know if I can talk about the details of that movie so much because I was sitting there watching it, just trying to not be angry.
Right.
And just that thing where you have to recast people and try to retell the same thing and not do anything different. And I can never tell whether they were trying to make fun of the movie, if they didn't know what they wanted to do with the movie, if there were 30 people involved, and they just never settled the argument about what the movie was going to be over or what.
I really feel like we were told in the film why the film was made. I feel like the studio told the Wachowskis, hey, you make it or we'll make it, because we have the authority to do that. Yeah. And so one of them, Lana? Was it Lana? Doesn't matter. The one that said, okay, I'll make it, did that just so that they could have the reins a little bit.
Yeah.
So they could say, well, this was our decision.
Yeah.
It's not taken out of their hands. I
would love to see that idea made by somebody that wanted to make a movie or knew how to make a movie.
It reminded me of Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which is one of my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street films, where it's outside of the continuity of the films, but the films affect the new continuity. And I loved the idea of, okay, well, Keanu Reeves, I was kind of hoping when we saw the trailers, I was hoping he would be playing Keanu Reeves. I was like, I love the idea of the actors who made The Matrix realize they're actually in a Matrix.
Yeah.
I loved that idea. I think it was a very clever idea. The fact that they said, like, well, no, actually, this is still just the Matrix from the previous films. It's a continuation of that story. It's in the world of the previous films. That's fine. I don't think that makes the same. Clearly, it doesn't make the same commentary.
I'd love to hear 10 people watch that movie and then just independently, not in the same room, record what they thought the movie was about.
Right.
So you could see there'd be 10 different people that nobody understood what the hell they watched. They just were confused by the whole thing.
And that is one of the things I respect Wachowski's for, and one of the things that got me to appreciate the second and third film more is when you start like looking at the themes and then what they were saying through the themes, and like, well, why these characters were included, why there's vampires, why there are ghosts, that kind of thing. I do respect what they did with the second and third film, and much like the Star Wars prequels, I've come to enjoy them as time has passed.
And speaking of it being mishandled, there was a Matrix Online game that I think I got like some little disc for when I bought one of the DVDs. It was going to take you to this online world. Of course, I lived in Glasgow and had dial-up internet, so it took me 25 minutes to download a 3-minute song. So the idea of playing an online game was completely outside of the realm of anything I could do. So it almost seems like maybe the movie just sort of hit it at the wrong time too, to develop some of the other stuff that could have come out of it, where you could have made some massive, awesome video games in that world. And you could have spun off into any kind of series you wanted to about other things that happen inside the Matrix. I mean, they had it all kind of written out and some of the stories already, or you had some other material you could work with. The same stuff that was in the Animatrix. You could have made an anime show about it. You could have made a TV series for Netflix about it. I mean, just why? I don't know if it's because maybe in the theaters those first two didn't have the success they wanted to, so the theaters or the studios come in and be like, well, now we're done. Let's not push it. And of course, when you come back as late as they did for that fourth movie, you're so far removed from the original stuff that it's, who knows even what even the motivation to make that movie at that time even was, you know. But there's so much other stuff that could have spun out of that if it had been handled as a big property, you know.
At the time, my criticism was that I felt like the Wachowskis had a wonderful idea, but their idea wasn't actually beyond the first Matrix.
Yeah.
And so they had to come up with a world. So instead of, you know, they've created this world and they have this larger idea that's going to take place in it, they created a tight story that was the first film, and then they had to build upon that. And I felt like that was...
They referenced Zion in the first movie, and I think it's like basically Zion's where the party will be if we ever win.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just like, there was no big description of it. It's a big thing with gates that we fly, we dock our ships in or any of that kind of stuff. It was,
right.
So having to create that after the fact, I'm sure does make it a little harder to do. But it's like it's going to be the same theme you're going to get into in some of the other properties we talk about, is that these directors that do this, they go off into some other big project right after they have a successful thing. And it's like, why? Why did you have to go make, what was the Wachowski brothers movie about the girl that does the voice?
Jupiter Rising?
Jupiter Ascending or Rising.
Jupiter Ascending, yes.
Whatever that was. It's like, why did you have to go do that? Why couldn't you just done
Jupiter Ascending?
Take that budget and keep it in the Matrix world.
Well, that was in 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've tried to sit through that movie a couple of times. I've never made it.
Isn't Channing Tatum a dog guy?
And yeah, Mila Kunis is who I was trying to think of. I'd watch her like yodel, but I just couldn't watch that movie. It was just so all over the place, and just I could never get into it.
Yeah, I am surprised that the Matrix didn't have more of a larger intermedia impact, because like you were saying, there were some games.
If you don't have the plan, all you have to do is come out and make a press release and like, we got big plans for the Matrix, and then there'll be people speculating about it for 2 years while you go do whatever you need to do to build it. But they go off and make other movies, and I guess the Wachowskis, they did do V for Vendetta though, right?
Yeah,
so that was pretty close to this.
I did enjoy that.
That was pretty awesome. So that was definitely worth doing. But I don't.
That was 2005. So yeah, they definitely were working on that in conjunction around the time of the Matrix. I can't believe that was 2005. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Time.
I couldn't remember where that landed in those three movies, but
so that actually released the same year as the Matrix Online.
Okay.
At that time, I was playing Star Wars Galaxies, and you can't do 2 MMOs at once. So
yeah, I've never been able to play online games just because of where I've lived and the amount of money I would spend on computer stuff.
But ultimately, I think after the films came out and the comics came out and it kind of petered out in the 2010s, I think I was content with what the Matrix was as a franchise.
Yeah.
Like I said, I came to appreciate the second and third films, even if I still don't think they hold up against the first one. They
closed the story though.
Yeah.
Which was.
I definitely think the Matrix Resurrection was entirely unneeded. Yeah. Even after it sat for a little bit, I don't even in my personal headcanon of the Matrix, that's not a part of it.
Yeah.
I don't feel as if it makes the events of the Matrix any better. I don't feel as if it gives me more closure. It's just unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably the biggest word for most of these sort of tail ends of some of these franchises. But let's move on to the next one there.
Yeah, absolutely.